Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. Today we are doing the first ever tier list here on the channel. Since we've covered all the archetypes and the basis of what they do going into set 16 Realm of the Gods, I thought it'd be cool to pretty much rank all the archetypes and see where they fall, because this set is a lot more impressive than the last couple sets, more so like more impressive than set 15. So I feel like these archetypes are worth talking about in like a competitive headspace, and I've been doing that on the Patreon as well, kind of breaking it down by color and archetype. So if you want to check that out, make sure to hit up the Patreon down in the description. Lots of good competitive articles there you guys can learn from, as well as coaching. I did post a coaching video yesterday if you guys want to see what some of that is like. It's pretty good interaction, honestly, and it's been really cool to work with a lot of players. But anyways, yeah, we're doing a tier list today, and the way this is going to work is we have our A, B, C, D, and F tiers, typical grade school tiers. No S tier, and that kind of leads into how I'm ranking this, because we are going to talk about some comparisons to the modern format, and of course that could change with the set 16 Realm of the Gods ban list, but I think there's a pretty common consensus that people don't really want the ban list to necessarily kill the top decks. Like, no one really wants to see Icarus and Gogeta Xeno unplayable. Maybe Cell Surge. I'm sure there's a lot of people that would want to see Cell Surge unplayable, which I wouldn't be too upset about. But anyways, yeah, we are going to compare these decks in part to their counterpart archetype, as in, the colors and those decks that are in that color to their other archetype in that same color. But we're also going to talk about them in the grand scheme of the current meta. And if the ban list comes out and it's a huge, ginormous, crazy ban list, maybe I'll do an updated tier list talking about the set 16 archetypes. I'll also obviously do my usual video where once we get the ban list and the full scope of the meta, I'll do my predictions for what I think will be the top decks going into set 16. But yeah, if there's a crazy ban list, maybe I'll update this Realm of the Gods only tier list. So anyway, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe. Let's get on into this. We'll talk about it color by color. So we're starting off with red U7 Goku. I think this deck is very, very good. Red's been a little bit unimpressive ever since it got absolutely neutered on the emergency set 14 ban list. And of course, that ban list was rightfully implemented. That color was just absolutely ridiculous, killing people on turn 2, sometimes even turn 1. But as a result, red has not been that great as of late. It's really been like the go-to rogue color. It's had some decent rogue aggro decks like red Jiren, red U7 Gohan, red Vegeta, even red Broly BR to a degree. But this deck is coming around more so as like a red mid-range deck, but it can still hit pretty hard because it has a lot of one-drop threats. But it does introduce a really powerful red boss monster that can clear the board, look at the opponent's hand. But that card's only really playable in this deck because it requires Sparking 20, and this leader is kind of like a Vegex in the sense that it bursts so much, but shouldn't be too broken because it's in red, and most of the red cards don't really work too well out of the graveyard. But anyways, yeah, I'm thinking that this guy is going to go into A tier, and I really do think that he is going to help put red back on the map as far as, meta goes. This should be a pretty solid meta deck. Next up, we're going to Grand Priest. This is a deck that I really, really like because of the creativity part of it. I feel like there are so many ways you can build it, but I think it suffers from a really centralized problem, which is going to be the amount of clunk that's in your hand at any given time, because you have to run a lot of 1-drop 10k combos. Now, don't get me wrong, there are various effects in the deck that let you combo with a god with while ignoring its combo cost, which is great. But I mean, you only use those effects once, maybe twice per turn. So while you're trying to use those, the rest of your deck is just going to kind of be what it is. And multicolor really isn't all that strong. It was pretty good going just a set or two back before blue yellow got neutered, but that was really the only multicolor deck that was really making heavy meta splashes. The rest of the multicolor stuff was more so rogue than anything else. So I'm really going to put this guy probably between C and D. In terms of competitive viability, again, I think the deck is really well designed. I think it's really cool, really fun. I love there are many different ways you can build the deck. But as far as red decks go, man, I even kind of want to put it in D tier, because there's so many other red decks that you're going to play before you play Great Priest in a competitive aspect. Even though Great Priest is not a true red deck, again, it is like a rainbow color deck, but even then there are better rainbow color decks like SS4 Bardock. So as far as competitive viability, probably gonna go in D tier. I can definitely see an argument for C, but I mean, I guess not too much is too different there. Then we have SSG Trunks. Okay, so this one I think is a little bit more dependent on what happens on the ban list as far as Gogeta Xeno is concerned. I do think this is a leader that can house the Gogeta Zito engine very, very well, but if you take the pure Archetype Trunks deck and don't really include Gogeta Zeno cards, and you take the pure Gogeta Zeno Archetype, Gogeta Zeno is by far and away better, right? They both have a lot of like 1 energy plays, but Trunks' main boss monster is a 2 energy play as opposed to Thwarting Dark Empire and all the other Gogeta fusions being a 1 energy play, and they just have a lot better, you know, impactful effects. But again, it's going to really come down to how good of a home SSG Trunks offers the Gogeta Zeno engine, and I think there are pros for SSG Trunks, but Gogeta Zeno is obviously a great leader for the deck. Draw upon fusion, mill up to 5 cards per turn, whereas Trunks can selectively put cards in the warp, setting up fusion. But for that reason, because I think Gogeta Zeno is probably a better house for its own deck, I'm going to put Trunks in the B tier. Again, still a great black leader. It just requires a little bit more I guess investment. Like, again, blocking for your unison, you got to play a 2-cost unison, as where the Gogeta Zeno engine is able to play free unisons, which is again another really big thing for the deck. Dabura, man, I'm putting this in F tier. You guys saw how I talked about this in the evaluation video. It's just so bad, man. Like, swap has been a very, very powerful mechanic in the history of Dragon Ball Super, and Dabura just takes that and says, okay, we're gonna just balance it into the ground. It is, you can look at it and say it's very, very well balanced, but requiring both a discard cost and a spirit boost cost is just way too much when all the swap effects of the past have been so undercosted. And again, those were busted, definitely a little bit overpowered, but this, you could have had the spirit boost cost or the discard cost and not both, and this could have just been a lot better while not being overpowered really in any way. So I kind of wish they went that route with it, but they didn't, so we're going with this guy in the F tier. Quite possibly, in my opinion, the worst deck in the set, just because of how odd it operates. I don't know, but anyways, we're going with Beerus up next. So Beerus and Champa are very, very similar, so I'm going to talk about them in tandem. I actually have an article that came out today talking about green in set 16. We talk a little bit about the current state of green, what could happen following a certain set of ban lists, and then we talk about Champa and Beerus and how they might land in the meta. Definitely gonna be more rogue than anything, and it's just so weird that green seems to be Bandai's experimental color. Like the 2 decks in A and B tier, for example, they're just such, they offer you raw power, where Champa and Beerus have this really weird gimmick that just isn't really going to work out a lot of the time. It's very easily interruptible. It's not necessarily super consistent because they're kind of reliant on a field card that they don't start and play with, so it's pretty weird. So my opinion, I'm putting Beerus in D tier and Champa in C tier. I talked about it both in the video and in today's article, that I think Champa is the better deck compared to Beerus. Even though it's so similar, I think the quality of Champa's battle cards are just way better. It's got a 1-drop searcher that helps search for your unison that can help find the field card, which is just way better than anything Beerus has in terms of a starter card. And the battle cards for Champa, I think, are way better. I think both 4-cost hits are very, very good cards. And Beerus has the 4-drop SR Goku, but that card's kind of tough to put into play. But yeah, at the end of the day, they're both going to be green rogue decks, and probably not the best green rogue deck at that. King Cold and Gotenks are definitely way better. And of course, if Cell Surge I guess remains playable after the ban list, that's just going to be an S tier deck. So as far as green goes, these are not going to be making that many splashes in the grand scheme of things. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if like we saw a random Champa top a regional. That'd be kind of cool, or maybe like an online webcam event. I think that could definitely happen, but definitely not crazy strong, and that just seems to be the problem with green in general. But all right, next up we're moving on to SSG Goku. Now this one's tough for me to place. I think this leader would be a lot better if Soul Striker were to be banned on the set 16 ban list. Now I gave my thoughts on that in a previous video already. I don't think Soul Striker is going to be banned because it hasn't really put up those crazy results that Icarus, Gogeta Zeno, and Cell Surge have. Nor do I think it needs to be banned, basically for that same reason. Just hasn't really taken this like dominant role in the meta. So if that leader were to go, I think this SSG Goku leader would be able to be ranked a lot higher, because it's basically just a watered down worse version of Soul Striker. I do like the filter that it offers, even though it doesn't truly plus on the unawakened side, but you can make up for that in a number of ways. You draw 3 on awaken, you're able to draw a few extra cards on your awakened side, and unlike Soul Striker, you untap 1 as opposed to Soul Striker's 2. So it really is just a watered down version of Soul Striker. I almost want to put it in B tier, but I feel like while Soul Striker exists, there is literally zero reason to play this leader. As in, if you were to compare the two, there's no way you'd say, okay, I'm going to play SSG Goku over Soul Striker for this reason. There's just no valid way to do that. So I think for that reason, it's got to go into C tier. Maybe if Soul Striker were to be banned, I could be convinced to put it into B tier. But I think even then, there'd be blue leaders better than it. So yeah, C tier for now, B tier if Soul Striker gets hit. And then we have the Whis leader. This is obviously the worst blue deck in the set compared to SSG Goku. At least SSG Goku can be used in like a generic blue shell and do some interesting things. Whis is very, very locked to his own archetype, and the concept of it is just very, very weird. The leader you're playing and the unison you're meant to play for the deck are never going to attack your opponent, or at least they shouldn't be, because they tap themselves to get their effects, and you're going to usually want to tap them to do their effect rather than actually attack with those cards, right? And then besides that, you're giving your opponent 15k battle cards, and the goal of your deck is to attack into your opponent's board, and once you successfully KO their battle cards, you get various effects, which is like kind of cool in concept, but it's not very practical. You're spending so much time dealing with their board, especially board that you're giving them in part, and when are you really putting pressure on their leader? Yes, some of the battle cards restand after they KO battle cards, but then if you got to focus a unison, or you can only really do chip damage at their leader, that's not going to be so great. So for me, blue Whis is going into the D tier. Next up, we have Trunks and Vegeta. This leader, like, just going back to the green conversation where they're, it's so gimmicky, it seems like such an experiment. Trunks and Vegeta is just raw power, both in the leader and in the battle cards in the deck. Like, the leader is very similar to Icarus in a lot of ways, mostly because of the Awakened Leader's ability to revive 1-drops, and those 1-drops draw you cards on play. That's a really, really strong effect. Granted, I don't think this draws quite as many cards as Icarus, and if we were doing like a full meta tier list here, Icarus would of course be in the S tier, and I'm going to slot Vegeta Trunks in the A tier, because I think as far as the yellow leader goes, it's perfectly generic enough to be a good yellow leader. Like, if Icarus gets banned, I want to play this leader. I don't really want to play yellow Gotenks, because I think that this leader is going to offer you a lot more draw power. Also, the leader effect basically gives you a free Champa. Like, you could save deck space by not playing Further Instruction Champa, and you still have access to that type of effect, which is insane. Or you can play 1 Champa if you typically like to play 2. Like, this leader is just so crazy good. Then we have Goku Black Wish. This one for me is going in B tier, because personally I think it's a slightly worse deck than Trunks Vegeta, but not by all that much. Like, I would even possibly put this in the front of B tier, because I do think it's a good deck. Again, I mentioned in the video that I covered this. I think it's going to be a very, very tough deck to build, and honestly, I don't even want to think about putting a build together until we see the ban list, because there's so many cards that could fit so well in this deck. But you have to play all the Dragon Ball / Wish stuff. You got to play all the yellow good stuff. You got to play the archetype stuff if you want to go that route of the archetype. That's just so many different avenues of cards you're trying to put into this deck that I could see getting stuck at 60 cards and like making it very difficult to go lower than that. So again, I want to see the ban list before I really put a solid build for this together, but I am going to slot it in B tier, because I definitely don't see it being better than Icarus, and I think as of right now it's probably slightly worse than Trunks and Vegeta, although in my opinion not by that much. And then I do want to talk about Vegeta Crimson Warrior, because it is a promo leader coming out with the set. This is interesting because it's another blue leader, but it supports this, rampy style of red blue Gogeta nonsense, right? That has a burn condition, top end boss monster, so it's kind of like its own thing. The leader itself is very, very powerful. Again, we'll have to see what the Q&A says once set 16 comes out, but as of right now, this leader can +2 like just inherently, and that's a very powerful thing the leader has going for it. But again, it's very much locked in that archetype, so while the leader is very powerful and can offer you a lot of pluses, you're gonna only be as powerful as that archetype is, right? And I will say, shout out to Aspira, it's pretty cool that that archetype was able to top one of the online regionals of last format. That's a pretty cool thing. So for me, this leader being as strong as it's perceived to be, I'm probably going to slot it in C tier, because again, I think the archetype is decently rogue, but not anything crazy like B or A tier, so that's where I have it. But yeah, guys, I mean, this is my ranking, and just re-looking over it, I definitely think I like what's in A tier. I think Red Goku's very good. I think Vegeta Trunks is very good. B tier, I also like it. SSG Trunks and Goku Black, very solid. C tier, I think this is pretty fair. I think, again, SSG Goku, SSG Vegeta, and Champa, I think in C tier are good. And the only real reason we're differentiating between Champa and Beerus is because I do think Champa is slightly better, even though they're both kind of lower end rogue green decks. And then D tier, yeah, these decks are not going to be super good, even on a rogue level, in my opinion. Maybe there'll be some interesting rogue builds. That'd be kind of cool to see. And then F tier, yeah, Dabura, like, the swap cards within its archetype thing are so bad. The leader itself, I actually don't think is too bad. And there are a handful of cards in the archetype that I think are good, but just like the way the deck is meant to function, I feel like it just doesn't even function. But anyways, guys, of course, I want to know what you think in the comments below about this tier list. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.